and I'm watching the rise. And I wouldn't say I'm shocked, cause I'm hardly surprised. This one's for the ride, this one's for who knew I'd make it, just needed some time. This one's for my wife, could've left 1,000 times just about my side. This one's for the grind, I knew it would happen.
Hey, what's up, everyone? My name is Randy Kaye, and I'm the host of the Caught Up podcast. Today we have Tyler Pazik. He is a mental performance consultant who has worked with sports teams in and out of the Power 5 conferences, Fortune 500 companies, military professionals, USA national teams, and other professional athletes. Tyler has a master's degree in sport psychology from Texas Christian University and has been continuously acknowledged both regionally and nationally as a leader in the field of sport psychology. Tyler, it's always great to see you. Thanks for taking the time to catch up.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. How are things?
They're great. Can't complain right now. You know, living in Gilbert, Arizona, the weather is pretty awesome right now. Can't
beat it, right? We've had a great spring. And I think the last time where I kind of met you face to face was you were at a softball tournament helping. I think, are you helping Hamilton, or you just happened to be there that day?
Yeah, I'm working with the Hamilton softball team this year.
Awesome. How's that going?
Yeah, I mean, it's going really well, actually. The high school athletes are really into it, and they're super open, and they're willing to learn. I think there's been a big push since COVID for, mental health. And I try to separate the two between mental health and mental performance. But since there has been a big push in the mental health area, mental performance has kind of tagged along and been right there with it. So yeah, a lot of athletes have already heard about sports psychology and mental performance. And so they're like, oh, what is it? Like, I want to learn more. Like, I don't even know what I don't know. So yeah, please share with me. So yeah, they've been super open, and it's been really awesome working with them.
That's awesome. I have a buddy who he owns an MMA gym, and they bring in fighters from all over the world. And he talks to me all the time about how they just don't lose. Everybody that comes to train with him doesn't lose. But he's always talking to me about mindset, strength, and technical ability. And he says, Randy, you're too focused on the technical stuff. You gotta start checking in and see how their mind is and how those players are doing, because it plays such a key role in their performance. And so, and I'll be honest, I mean, I wouldn't disagree with that. I think, just as a coach, we're always trying to, we have so much going on. For the most part, we have, obviously regular lives, and then we're just trying to get those athletes all to one particular practice or a game or a tournament, that we do forget to check in on those things. How did you get involved in this in sports psychology? And then you kind of alluded to it. There's a mental health side, and then there's the sport performance side. Can you talk about how you got into it and then the difference?
Yeah, for sure. And kind of bouncing off what you talked about with your MMA coaching friend, like the mindset piece of it is like instilling that belief in them that like they can go out there and accomplish whatever they want to accomplish, And one thing I talk about with coaches a lot is like, one, understanding what is your coaching philosophy? Like, what do people or your athletes, know you for? Like, what do you come back to over and over and over again to kind of instill that mindset? And then also at the end of practices, at the end of games, sometimes there's those little like irritations or frustrations with your athletes, like, oh man, they just didn't have like any energy today, or where was the dugout energy at? Or like, man, it just seemed like they weren't focused out there during the, the fourth or fifth inning. And it's like all those little frustrations and irritations, it's like, those are the best motivational speeches the next day. When you have some time to go back and think about it and flip that like negative into a positive, and like find that positive praise moment, and then use that as motivation for the next day to help instill that mindset in them of, focusing, of bringing energy, of putting the effort out each and every pitch. So like, when I think he's talking about mindset, like that's one thing that he is talking about, instilling that like deep self-belief and inner confidence that like I can do it every single pitch. And it's just like continually hitting that over and over again. And a lot of that comes back to your personal like coaching philosophy. And that's different for every single coach, you know, and you don't have to be, it doesn't have to be this like grand, you know, 5, 10, 15-minute speech. It could be a quick 15-minute or 15-second sound bite, you know, that you just hit them with to like remind them of like, that is the mindset that you need to be great.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to exploring that with you a little bit and figuring out, you know, how I can implement, you know, the plan or we talk about the process, right? You know, what does that really even mean? But I'm looking forward to finding
It's a
that.
great question.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to finding that because, you know, to your point, I mean, energy is always a topic, right? Our energy, what comes first, energy or production? You know, a lot of times we could be down and then all of a sudden we get a couple hits or a stolen base or something positive happens. And then all of a sudden the energy's there and you're like, guys, why can't we just start with that? Like, I've done a little bit, I've seen a little bit on you. And so I've you know, picked up a few things and I'm interested to, you know, just hear more. So, but yeah, if you could just touch a little bit on, you know, why you coach or why you got into this field and where it goes from here.
Yeah, so when I went to Indiana State and got my undergrad there, played baseball at Indiana State in Terre Haute, Indiana. And then when I got done, I was working 3 different jobs. I was a high school baseball coach, a high school strength coach, and a junior college strength coach. And so, like, basically every single day I was up at like 5 or 6 a.m. and then I wasn't getting home until like 10 or 11 p.m., 6 days a week. I had Fridays off, which was nice. But,
Yeah.
you know, after a while, it kind of wears on you. And I'm like, man, there's got to be a better way than this. And so I was like, I sat down with myself and I'm like, okay, like, what do I really love to do? And what would be like an awesome career to go into? And I just thought about how like I do enjoy teaching like the physical skill acquisition, but it's definitely not a passion. The mental performance piece of things, the sports psychology piece, like that's what I really like teaching is, you know, the mindset and then also those mental skills that help you achieve consistent peak performances day in and day out. And so I was like, oh, I wonder if you could do that for a living. So I looked it up and sure enough, you know, sports psychology consultant was there. And then I went to TCU and got my master's in sports psychology. And while I was there, I had a mentor that was he is a consultant in mental performance. And so I interned under him down at TCU and also went to TCU to get like the more like the research side of sports psychology. So I got that practical side from him and also the business side. And then the research backed side from going to class every day down there at TCU. And then while I was there, I started up this thing I did every Saturday. It was called Pazik Pep Talk. And every Saturday people could call me on my personal phone. I would give them a little pep talk on, and we would have, you know, some sports psychology topic to go over and just talk about life. And it was really cool. And that morphed into what is now the Pazik Performance Group, which is my, you know, consulting company for mental performance and sports psychology. That's how I got into it.
How long did you do pep talks? Like what were those like? Was it like
yeah, so I did it
they literally called you on your phone?
Yeah, I put it out there on like social media and I would do it I started it about halfway through my first year at TCU. So in probably the late fall. And I was just driving home one day and I heard someone say pep talk on the radio. And I was like, man, Pazik pep talk kind of has a ring to it. You know, I'll try it out. And that was on a Friday. And I woke up Saturday morning, I put it out there and I was like, hey, Pazik pep talk from, I think it was like 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Give me a call. And then sure enough, like right after I posted it, someone called and then it just sort of went from there. Yeah, it was awesome. And literally they would just call in and we would talk about some sports psychology topic, or I would ask them, you know, what's one thing they want to chat about and how could mental performance help them get more of what they want or get them from where they are to where they want to be. So that was actually a lot of fun. And I think back on it, I'm like, man, that was such a cool organic way to kind of build my own business and, you know, like brand and whatever, while also kind of deepening my own understanding of the mental game and what people are looking for out of it.
Sure, you just threw yourself into it
For
and
real.
just went for it. Yeah, no, that's awesome. What is the difference? Because I keep hearing sports psychology. Your degree is in sports psychology, right? But then the term mental performance coach seems to be a little bit more prevalent. Can you explain the difference and why?
The difference between sports psychology and like mental performance coach.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's really just a title difference. I don't think
Okay.
there's any difference between like a sports psychology coach and a mental performance coach.
Okay.
I think there's difference between like a mental health counselor and a mental performance coach. I think like mental health basically takes you from like less than optimal and brings you back to normal, and then can help you move forward. But I think a mental performance coach really just like takes you from where you are to becoming, like a more consistent and like peak performance person overall. Like just makes you better. Like I think
Gotcha.
some people need mental health counselors. I think basically everybody could learn and use a mental performance coach.
Okay. Okay. And when you talk about um, consistent behaviors lead to consistent results. I've seen you say that online. Is that what you mean by everyone could use it? I mean, just those little things in terms of being able to identify what is going to help you move forward.
hmm Yeah. So like your behaviors, it's looking at, okay, like when I'm performing at my best, what am I doing? And building your awareness around what it is that you're doing when you're performing at your best. And then also like building awareness around, okay, when I'm not achieving peak performance, like what am I doing then? And so obviously you want to do less of the stuff that's leading to those dips in performance and more of the stuff that's leading to those optimal performances. And so
Gotcha.
with consistent behaviors, like the more consistent your behaviors are, the more you're going to be able to understand, why you're actually getting the results that you're getting. Or not getting the results that you're getting,
Right.
and like if we were to just like kind of simplify that down to a single pitch, right? And let's take a pitcher, for instance. Like, if a pitcher knows what they're thinking about when they're about to throw that pitch, or they know, like, my routine, consistent behaviors lead to consistent thoughts, and consistent thoughts lead back to consistent behaviors. So, like, usually I start with the routine. Is your routine consistent? Your behaviors between pitch, do you take a breath? How do you step onto the mound? When do you take your breath? And then on top of it, it's like, okay, what are you thinking about, or what are you visualizing, what are you feeling in your body while you're going through that routine, using your physical routine as checkpoints for what you're thinking about mentally. And so if those behaviors are inconsistent, then that's going to lead to inconsistent thoughts. Or if your thoughts are inconsistent, that's probably going to lead to inconsistent behaviors, down lane, like after you release the ball. And then you could expand that out to, like game to game stuff, or day to day, week to week, month to month. And ultimately, like that's where you start to understand your process. Like you talk about, like, what is the process? It's like
Yeah.
literally understanding the behaviors that you partake in on a day in and day out basis to get what you want out of your life, or out of your career, out of your sport.
Is that going to be something that is? I mean, obviously, it's different for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, right? And is there a way, is there like a baseline that, or a test or some sort of survey that, how do we start to figure those things out? Or how would you figure that out for a player?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it starts with the easiest way to start it is with your in-game performances, pitch to pitch. Like, what are you doing? What are your routines from pitch to pitch, either in the
Mm,
box or on the mound or out in the field? And then from there, it's like, okay, what thoughts are popping up for you? And I like to use productive or unproductive. So, like, when things are going really well, those are obviously productive thoughts. So, what are you thinking about? And then when things aren't going well, those are unproductive thoughts, or things that are getting in the way of you not performing the way you want to perform. So that's where sort of that like trial and error comes into play, and like the discussions over time. Because like if an athlete comes to me and they're hot right now, like that's great, because then it's like, oh, okay, well, what do you think about? It's like, man, I just get in the box and all I think about is like, see the ball. It's like, boom, see the ball. Right. And then say a month goes by and they kind of have a dip in their performance and we talk again and it's like, all right, well, like what's going on right now? And they're like, oh man, there's just like so much pressure. I feel like there's so much pressure on me. I'm up there and like there's a runner at third and I'm thinking about how I got to get a hit, and it's like, okay, well, like all of those things are just unproductive thoughts. So we're getting away from the one thing that we know helps, which is see the ball. It's like, okay, let's just get back to seeing the ball. And then that'll help get them back most of the time. And then also just like being able to like talk about thoughts as just that, they're just thoughts, and then being able to discern between the ones that are helping us, the ones that aren't helping us. And then obviously paying attention more to the ones that are helping us than are not helping us.
Right. How much do you put into the process, or well, I guess it would be the process versus the production or the outcome?
Well, here's the thing about that. It's kind of like a paradox, right? Like if you want more results, then you have to focus on the process that gets those results. But at the end of the day, like we're judged by our results. So it's like if you're only hitting 150, right? Like you could have the best process in the world, but if you're only hitting 150, you're probably not going to play very often. So then that might not even be a mental thing at that point. And that's why coaches spend so much time on the technical side of things, because that's where you'll see the biggest gains. Like when parents come to me and they're like, hey, my 9-year-old needs mental performance. I'm like, okay, well, let's back up a second. Like, how much are you guys actually going out and just playing catch? Or how much are you actually going to the cages and just having your kid hit off the tee or, front toss into your kid? And it's like, well, not very much. And I'm like, okay, let's start there. And then, let's talk again, maybe in the future, a little down the road. So like that technical aspect is definitely necessary. Like you need the skill in order to actually have mental performance, like help you out that much more. But like if you're not practicing and you're not putting in that hard work, then like mental performance is kind of like, well, what are we doing here? Like we're not even like usually. So for instance, one of the athletes I've been working with for a couple of years, he's going to San Diego State to pitch next year. Like when he's kind of in between seasons, like he'll take a month off from throwing, like we won't talk for that month either, because it's like, all right, dude, like go live your life, like enjoy being away from baseball and away from your sport. And then once you come back to your sport, like that's when we normally start picking up again. And again, like just building clarity around like what behaviors is he going through on a daily basis and weekly basis to, get more out of what he wants in the future.
So would you say there's a certain age that kids or families should start to even explore this process?
Yeah, I would say like it depends on how serious they are. Like that's where it comes down to, like, are they actually into it? Like I've worked with like actually some of the younger kids that I work with are the most fun to work with, because like they'll just tell you how it is. As soon as you ask them a question, they'll literally say exactly what's on their mind. There's no filter there, which is super fun. But a lot of kids, they already do these things naturally, like they take their breath naturally, or they have little routines that they do because like they found that, okay, like one of the goalies I worked with, this 12-year-old soccer player, like I asked him about like focus and what helps him focus. And he said, oh, well, I run to the left side of the goalpost and I touch that. I run to the right side, I touch that goalpost, and I jump up and I touch it. I clap my hands, I take a breath, and then I tell myself, focus. And I'm like, dude, that's literally what I teach pro guys to do. Right. I'm like, so it's like we almost get these things taught out of us, or like maybe it is like such a focus on the technical aspect of the game that we forget what we just like kind of intuitively know we should be doing. Yeah. So I don't know if there's necessarily an age that you should start. It just you work on different things at different times, So like with the younger kids, it's mainly like breathing and just being a good teammate and consistently showing up for your team and yourself. And then as you get older, it's a little bit more in depth.
Yeah, that's pretty that's pretty interesting that he was aware enough to tell you what works for him.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, what I found is that a lot of the younger kids that I work with, like they already do a lot of the stuff that kind of the pillars of mental performance that I roll through. It's like super awesome, actually.
Is there an easy way to break down the like categories? Are there categories of mental performance? Are there stages? Is there any way to break that down?
Yeah, I would say that the three things that I talk about a lot are confidence, communication, and leadership. So those are the three pillars that I hit on over and over again. And when it comes to confidence, that's such an umbrella term for so many different things, because confidence comes from a lot of different areas. It comes from your present performance, past performances, like your perspective on the situation, the people that you're surrounding yourself by, your preparation. So I would say that that's the preparation is where we spend a lot of time in mental performance, because like you only get 4, maybe 5 at bats in a game, right? It's like, so there's a lot of preparation that goes into that next at bat, or the next inning when you get on the mound. I mean, for professional pitchers, a starter only pitches once every 5 days. So it's like, what are you doing between those 5 days so that when you show up, you're ready to go?
Okay.
And when you understand your process between those times, like that's when again you start to see that like consistent growth in your game, or just your ability to stay on top and not really have those dips in performance. So like, for example, like one of the pro guys I work with, like his last outing wasn't the best. And so since he understands his process and we have like the day-to-day stuff that he's doing, it's like, okay, let's go back and look at what you were doing leading up to this start that might have led to a dip in your performance. And it was like 2 days before he was deadlifting for sets of 480 pounds. And it's like,
shoot.
all right, man, you might have been like a little bit just fried from, lifting so heavy. So this week he's taking a deload, and I mean, I fully expect him to be back to his normal self. And also there were some other things, but it's never just one thing most of the time. But that was just an example of how, like, okay, let's go back and look at the process and be like, okay, where can we tweak it so that we can get back to where we want to be in the future?
Yeah.
Or actually, I have another example real quick.
Sure.
One of the Hamilton softball girls, she's really good player, but she kind of had a dip for like a week and a half. And I was at the game, and I noticed that like she wasn't going through her routine every single time. Great pre-at-bat routine. Before the first pitch of the at-bat, she'd look at her barrel, take a deep breath, and then get in. And then she didn't go through her routine the rest of the at-bat. And so I just reminded her that it's an every time thing. And she's like, well, I noticed that I'm not going through it, but also like all I'm thinking about right now is how like I'm not hitting well, or how I'm striking out or rolling over. And then it was like, okay, well, like, let's just get back to, using your routine every single time. And then what's one thing that you were telling yourself earlier in the season when things were going really well? And she's like, oh, I was just like seeing myself drive it up the middle, like a hard barrel right up the middle. And I'm like, okay, well then when you take that breath between pitches, like literally telling yourself, all right, barrel up the middle, and now I think she's hit like 4 home runs over the last 5 games. So she's, performing like she wants to be now.
Yeah. You brought up two points, and one of them, the first one was self-talk, right? I hear that a lot. And then the other one was visualization. You talked a little bit about both. Are there any other examples like that stand out to you?
I mean, self-talk and visualization are huge. I think one thing that I've seen a lot on social media lately is like affirmations. And the thing about affirmations is that they don't necessarily help you in the game, and like they're great for, instilling that belief in yourself off the field. But one thing that you need to understand about affirmations is like, you can't just cover up the limiting beliefs with affirmations. You kind of got to get down to the bedrock of like, okay, like where is this belief coming from, or this like self-doubt, or like this limiting belief that I have? Where is that coming from? What is that? And then you need to admit and accept that you're actually thinking that in order to replace it. So if you're going up there and you're thinking to yourself like, oh man, like I suck, like I've struck out however many times in the last few games. It's like, if you're thinking about that and then just trying to put on top of it this affirmation of like, I'm a great hitter, I catch barrels, then it's like you still aren't dealing with the root of the issue. But once you can be like, oh man, like, yeah, I'm doubting myself right now because I've struck out the last few games. And then from there, it's like, okay, well, like, what's my plan moving forward, so that like, what can I change in my process? Maybe it's my approach. Maybe it's how I'm practicing and preparing before the games. And then you can actually like make some changes there, little tweaks moving forward. And then when you do use that like power performance phrase in the game of like, okay, hard barrel up the middle, right? Like that's actually all you're thinking about, because you've dealt with that limiting belief or that self-doubt beforehand. So I think that's one thing that I've seen a lot lately. And I'm like, man, affirmations are great, but like you can't just like slap a Band-Aid on with affirmation. Like you need to deal with the root cause as well. So visualization is also huge. Like if there's one thing that's been studied in sports psychology, maybe overstudied, it's probably visualization. Like everybody should double down on their visualization before games or at night, just because it is such a potent tool in the athlete's toolbox. And one study that's coming to mind that I remember reading about this was in my undergrad, but they took biathletes, so people that do the cross country and then they shoot the rifle at the targets. And they had 3 different groups. They had one group that just did the normal stuff, did their cross country skiing, showed up, shot the normal amount of rounds. Then they had another group that shot half the amount of rounds, but they shot their actual rounds and then they visualized the other half. And then they had one group that only showed up to the rifle line and visualized everything. They didn't shoot a single round. And what they found after this like 4-week study was that the people that visualized only and the people that shot half and visualized half statistically outperformed those that only shot the rifle and did their regular cross country. So like, that's just one example, and that you see that consistently in the research. And then also the athletes that I have that do practice, meditation and visualization, they do perform better overall, because, like your mind doesn't know the difference between what you vividly imagine and what you physically experience. So like, even though you're not necessarily going through the actual rep, seeing an actual ball fly at you and hitting it for real, like you're still sending those micro impulses from your brain to your body and enhancing that mind-body connection through visualization. So yeah, that one's huge. And then with the self-talk, like we can talk ourselves into being, or we could talk ourselves out of being great athletes just as much as we could talk ourselves into being great athletes. So it's being aware of when we're talking ourselves out of it, and then noticing that, accepting that we're thinking that, and then replacing it with, okay, like how can I talk myself into being a great athlete here, instead of the other way around. And yeah, self-talk is also huge. Like, because when you're thinking about the self-talk, it's basically like a form of visualization. When you're telling yourself, okay, like hard barrel up the middle, we speak with words, but we think in images, and then those images get transferred into our body as physical feelings. And so when athletes come to me and I ask them, oh, what do you think about in the box? And they're like, oh man, I'm just a feel athlete, And I'm like, okay, well, here's the thing about being a feel athlete. What if that feel goes away? What do you do then? And they're like, oh yeah, that's never fun. It's normally like weeks, maybe months. I mean, one of the pro golfers that I was watching that like swing documentary on Netflix, and he lost that feel for like 2 years because he wasn't aware of like how feelings come from those images in our brain, and those images can be described with words. And so it's like, if you came back to like, okay, well, what words help me describe my swing, right? It's kind of like your swing cues, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a mechanical cue. It could just be something like line drive opposite field. That could be also something that works for you. But yeah, once you understand like what words are creating the images in your brain that get you back to that feel consistently, then you could literally just tell yourself those words with your self-talk, and boom, you're right back to the feel that you want.
It's kind of being aware, a little bit of self-awareness and understanding when you catch yourself, like you said. I think I heard you say on one of the social media platforms, catching thoughts, and it made me think of personally, and I remember this very vividly. I was in a playoff game once, and it was my first season, might have been my second season there, and at Centennial. And it was a 0-0 game or a 1-1 game in like the 6th, 7th, 8th inning. Actually, it was extra inning, so it was like 8th or 9th inning. And I started thinking, oh no, what if we lose? Like we might lose here. And I caught myself going, no, we're going to play another inning. We're going to win this game. Can you talk a little bit about
chills?
Right? Can you talk a little bit about catching thoughts and then turning those thoughts into something more positive?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you just gave a great example of that, and some people get caught up in like, oh, I have all this self-doubt. And it's like, well, thoughts are just thoughts, like your brain is just a thought factory. We have 40 to 50,000 thoughts a day, and it's just pumping them out all day long. So it's just being aware of what it is pumping out, and then going back in and being like, okay, like that thought's not helping me. So like, what is a thought that's actually going to help me right in this moment? So it's like, think about what you do want to happen. I talk a lot about the don't zone and the do zone, right? Instead of thinking about what you don't want to happen, catch that and then get back to thinking about what you do want to happen. So like a pitcher might be on the mound, and it's bases loaded, extra innings, 2 outs. And they're like, oh man, like I can't hit this person. Like, just don't hit this person. Whatever you do, don't hit them, right? And then what do you know? They hit them, or maybe they walk them, right? And it's like, well, we're thinking about what we don't want to happen. So getting back to like, oh, I don't want to hit them. Okay, well, what do I want to do? I want to throw this one on the outer third, right? And it's like, okay, well, then that comes back to your like power performance phrase of like, all right, drive good direction off the mound through the outer third of the zone. And then your body again will like organize around that thought, and you'll be more consistent with that. It's not like a for sure thing. It's not like, oh, every time you're going to throw it right there, but you'll definitely be more consistent because your thoughts are consistent and you're thinking about what you do want to happen. You're seeing it happen before you even go through the motion of doing it. So yeah, I mean, I get those thoughts too. Like your story made me think about how when I was working with this professional basketball team over in Iceland, and it was a tight game towards the end, and I was like, oh man, we're looking a little tired here, or like things seem to be getting a little bit out of control. The other team's on a 7-0 run right now, like, dang, are we about to like lose this game? Or like, I hope we don't just like the wheels don't fall off. And it's being like, okay, like, hey, let's get back to focusing on the next play. Like, what do we have to do to, get back to performing the way we want to perform? Or like, how do we come back to our strengths right here? And then, that's when I like stepped in and I was like, all right, guys, like, hey, like fatigue, you can like fight back against it. Like if you tell yourself you're going to be tired, yeah, you're probably going to be more tired. But if you say like, all right, like I'm a little bit tired right now, but I can still push, and you fight back against that belief, then like, again, that's when you start to see those performances increase again. And like people talk about mental toughness, and it's like, what is mental toughness? Mental toughness is just like this relentlessly solution focused mindset. That's all mental toughness is. It's when you come into adversity or a barrier, it's like, how do I get through this? Like, what do I want to happen right here? What am I going to do about it? Literally answering those questions. I mean, perfect example. I'm at University of Oklahoma working with their baseball team, and this kid comes in, throws an inning, and then he comes out and he's talking to the head coach, and he's like, man, I just feel like I got nothing in the tank. Like, I don't know why, like the ball's just like not coming out at all. And the head coach goes, great. Like, that is great awareness. He's like, now what are you going to do about it? And it came back to, all right, just stay back over the rubber and throw it through the glove. Next inning, he goes 1, 2, 3, comes out of the game. He had way more energy. And we were both, the head coach and I were like, man, I thought you had nothing in the tank. And he's like, oh, well, I guess I did. Right. And so it's like, it was just that thought of, I got nothing in the tank that was holding him back. And once he accepted that and then replaced it with what he did want to do, all of a sudden he's back to where he wanted to be. That was like, it was so cool.
I love that because, the whole talk more about what you want to do or what you want to, the goal you're trying to get to. I mean, it always brings me back to, we've all done it. We're sitting there coaching a base and we got a kid throwing up and you tell a kid, stay off the rise ball. And what do? They swing at the next rise ball. Because if I hear that as a coach calling pitches, I'm throwing another one higher, especially if they just swung at it, instead of saying, hey, work down. Let's work down. So I do that all the time myself. Dude,
that's a great example too. It's again, like, hey, we don't want to do this. But then as a coach, it's following up with like, okay, well, what do we want to do? We want to stay off the rise ball, or we want to leave the drop ball down, so it's like, all right, hey, see the ball up, or like, make sure it's in your zone,
Yep.
It's getting back to that do zone phrase over and over again. And again, it's not like you're not completely shunning the negative, right? Because like, we need boundaries to work within. I do talk a lot about like catching the positive praise moment, but also like, you need to let people know what the boundaries are and what the rules of the game are in order to actually have that peak performance. Sometimes with athletes, and to kind of drive that home, I'll say to them like, hey, you want to play a game? And then they're like, yeah, sure, let's play a game. I'm like, okay, you go first. And then they sit there and they're like, what are we doing? And I'm like, exactly. I'm like, you need rules. You need to know like, what is the game that we're playing, in order to actually be successful with it. And then most of the time they'll be like, okay, rock, paper, scissors. And I'm like, okay, well then the rules of the game are rock, paper, scissors, and so on and so forth. And the same thing out there on the field, it's like, okay, well, like, she's got a really good rise ball that she likes to throw up in the zone, so we're probably going to want to lay off of that and like sit on maybe a different pitch. Right. And it's like, okay, like, see that pitch. And then you're coming up with like the do zone things that you do want to do. Just continually telling yourself what you do want to happen.
Gotcha. How can a coach at my level, at the club level, at the high school level, because for the most part, I feel like, especially on the club side, our kids absolutely want to be there. They love being at a high competition level. They're trying to earn a college scholarship. This is kind of who they are, and we can talk a little bit about that. But how can I help them on those days when, like you said, like the kid said, he didn't have anything in the tank, or how do I identify that? Or is there any way I can be better as a coach instead of just being like, I don't know what this kid's problem is today. I just can't get anything out of her. We'll just put somebody else in. How does a coach at my level be better at something like that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think a couple of things. One is, continuing to build that trust with them and build that relationship with them when those times aren't happening, right? So I talk a lot about like garbage time and or people say like quality time, right? Like, but I call it garbage time because like that's the time when you really build the relationship. When you're basically talking about nothing, that means anything in like the grand scheme of things, right? Like you might be talking about what their favorite cereal is or what they had for breakfast that morning, right? But that's all garbage time that's building the relationship. So when you're talking about like nothing, quote unquote, then when you need to talk about something, quote unquote, that's important, like then they're more willing to listen to you because you've built that level of trust. And the other thing is asking them quality questions, like asking them about what is going on for you. I think I'm just thinking about like mound visits, for instance, right? Like coaches tend to go out there and they just do the talking. And it's like, well, let's take a step back and go out there and maybe like, hey, what's going on for you right now? and then from there, assessing in the moment and being like, okay, well, here's like one thing that I'm seeing that's going on, or being like, okay, well, like, is that thought helping us or not helping us? And they're like, well, like, it's definitely not helping me. Okay, well, like, what's one thing that you can focus on that is going to help you, right? And hopefully before then, you've chatted about maybe some of their power performance phrases. Be like, hey, last week you were talking about, just like staying in your legs, driving off the rubber right through the catcher. Like, you think that would be something that helps? And they're like, yeah, sure enough. And then most of the time, if they can like refocus onto that one thing, they'll be a lot more consistent moving forward. Like, I was working with a junior college baseball team 2 seasons ago, and this kid was pitching great. And then all of a sudden in the 5th inning, like, he got tagged for a home run and he had walked a guy. And I walk out to the mound and I was like, hey man, like, what's going on? And he's like, oh man, like, they're just on everything. They're seeing everything. Like, I got nothing left. Like, all of these unproductive thoughts. And I'm like, well, yeah, dude. I'm like, between pitches right now, your body language is terrible. You're shaking your head, your head's down. Like, you've given up 1 run so far. You've walked a guy. And I'm like, you've thrown 5 great innings. I was like, so let's just get back to focusing on what you need to focus on in order to actually get out of this inning. And he was like, oh man, I just don't know about the pitch calling and stuff like that. I'm like, okay, how about this? You worry about just taking a breath between every single pitch and focusing on driving it through the catcher's glove and hitting a target, and I'll call the pitches the rest of the inning. And literally he goes 9 pitches, 9 strikes, 3 strikeouts, and gets us out of the inning. And I'm like, dude, you just threw an immaculate inning basically since I came out. And he was all jacked up again. He's like, oh, I get it now. Like, yeah, I was focused on things that were unproductive, and then we refocused back onto just hitting a target, driving it through the glove. His just couple of thoughts. So going back to your question of like, how can a high school coach help? Like, I'd say those 3 things, like really building the relationships and like making use of that downtime, asking better questions, and then listening and helping them refocus onto like that one thought that is going to help them perform in the moment.
You mean just yelling out throw strikes doesn't help?
I was actually at a game the other day, and I heard I was sitting in the stands recording, and some of the parents were like, don't chase. And I'm like, I hope she's not hearing them right now, because,
Right.
If you're thinking about not chasing, you're probably going to chase. And I think every time I ask an athlete, like, yeah, when you're up there thinking, sometimes you get in the box and you're like, just don't roll it over. What happens? You wind up rolling over. Just don't pop it out to the second baseman again. What happens? You pop it out to the second baseman again, instead of getting back to like what you do want to do. And it's not easy. If it were easy, everybody would do it.
Right.
So, but you can train that over time. And it is a process. And I guess that's the other thing too that I've been talking a lot about with high school coaches lately. It's like, understand they're literally kids, and that it's always teaching. You're always teaching the game. And sometimes you got to teach and reteach. And then, find a different way to come at it than the way that you've been coming at it over and over again. If you feel like you're hitting your head against the wall, it's like, well, take a step to the side. There's a doorway there that you can walk through. You just got to come at it from a different vantage point.
Yeah. But back to your comment about don't chase, you just reminded me, or you just made me aware that I say that. I say with 2 strikes, I always say expand, don't chase. So I may have to redo that one.
Yeah. So what is one thing that you could say instead of expand, don't chase?
Expand, foul it off if you don't like it. Maybe, I don't know.
That's
foul
good.
It off. If unsure, if you foul it off. Foul
stick
it off.
To your approach. Hey, good 2-strike approach right here.
Yep.
Just choke up. See it up the middle other way.
Yep.
Or whatever.
We've been focusing a lot. On just hitting the ball down. And I actually got this from another coach, and then I've heard it before, but then another coach I just had on kind of had mentioned it. But it's amazing how many kids cannot really, like, if you put a net out 30 feet in front of them, they can't hit a ground ball into it consistently. And then, then hit a line drive at the net. So I go 2 ground ball, 2 line drive, 2 over the net, slightly over the net. And it's amazing how many kids have a hard time doing that. And I just, it's a whole nother topic, but just, body awareness and positional awareness to me are the things that come to mind. But back to the breathing, about your picture that you talked about breathing. I was listening to Team USA, I think it was a couple days ago. They had a podcast. They had a press conference because they made some announcements. And one of the girls said that one of the things that she has learned is breathe, or breath, brain, and body. What does that mean to you?
Well, to me, I'm not really sure, but to her, it means something. I'll tell you that much.
It means something. Okay.
But
okay.
I would have to ask her questions to know exactly what she's thinking about. But from a kind of, if we were to take a step back and look at what is the skill that she's drawing on to come up with those three things, I call them your mental ABCs. So if you were to simplify down your game to just three things, that make you successful, what are those three things? And to her, it's breath, brain, body. Another one of the athletes I work with, his is just see the ball, land soft, intent. And so, like, same thing with him. Sean Casey has this great video on YouTube of him talking about his three, and it's see the ball, hammer it, and breathe, I believe. So,
wow.
Like, it's really just like simplifying down your game to like, what is the one or two or three things that I need to focus on in order to be successful? Jack Swinsky, that plays for the Pittsburgh Pirates, when I was talking to him in the off season, he told me that like when he starts warming up for the day, he has like 5 different things that he cycles through. And then based off of how he's feeling that day, he picks one of them to focus on for the game. And he said most of the time it comes back to just line drive off the pitcher's kneecaps. Like that's the one thing that he's trying to do. Does he ever do that? Rarely. But like that's the one thought that he uses to kind of like help him stay connected up there in the box. So for her, again, it's like breath, brain, body, whatever that means to her. Like that's just her simplified game plan that she knows. Like if I focus on these 3 things, I'll probably be pretty good out there today.
Yeah. I wanted to talk just a little bit, and I don't know how you feel about it, but I think you touched on it a little bit. The mental health, those words are out there a bunch. Is that something that you talk about or get into at all?
What do you mean by that exactly?
Like just player mental health. I mean, there's a ton of stuff out there about, players and their, the stresses and the anxieties and, all the different phases that they go through when they're overwhelmed or don't know how to cope.
Yeah, I think there's different levels to it. Like performance anxiety is different from clinical anxiety or clinical depression. So if I see any like red flags like that when I'm working with an athlete, like I'll refer them out to an actual mental health counselor.
What are those red flags?
Or like that out of character sort of behaviors. That's one. Is a big one. Like over time, you start to understand like what sort of athlete this person is, or just what sort of person they are in general. And then when they start to do things that are way outside of the norm, that's when you might want to refer out to somebody else. And then like another one is like family issues. That's a big one that happens. And so it's like noticing when they start to talk about those things and being like, hey, like, I think we should, refer this out to somebody else that's a little bit more specialized in this domain, so that you have a professional that you can talk to. And like a lot of coaches and like, there's a lot of mental performance coaches out there too, that think that they can handle that. And it's like, okay, well, like once it gets to a certain point, like it's better to just refer that out to somebody else. Though, like you're not only you're really doing them a big service by having them meet with a professional, and you can go there with them and sit outside, and there's ways you could do that. But those are the 2 big ones: is like those abnormal behaviors, and then also like family issues. Just being aware of those couple of things.
Gotcha. And so like the support systems, you don't even get into that. You just refer them out when it comes to that situation.
Yeah. If it's like negative, if it's just like, how do I, say a kid is like trying to implement these things like the don't zone and the do zone. And they say to me like, okay, like, how do I talk to my parent about this? Right. Like that's a completely different conversation than like, those like more mental health problems with the
dark
home life.
Like the self-destructive. Gotcha. Mm-hmm. And what in the mental performance side then, what obviously the role of the player is to, work at it and have an open mind, I'm sure, to whatever it is that you're doing with them. But what can the parent do?
Yeah, the parents just continuing to really ask more and tell less and be a great communicator. Like there's 3 phases to the communication. There's active listening, there's paraphrasing, and then there's responding. And the paraphrasing piece is the biggest limiter when I see parents talk to their kids, or when I see anybody talk to anybody, really. It's like paraphrasing is the most missed communication skill. And basically what paraphrasing does is it lets the person know that you're talking to, that you just heard talk to you, that you heard them and that you understand them. And so like you're responding to them with the facts and the feelings of what they just said. And then they're like, oh, completely, like that's exactly it. And then you're able to get into your advice or, change the subject or whatever the next step of that conversation is going to be. But if you don't paraphrase, then that's where you start to run into a lot of roadblocks, because like if you don't paraphrase, then you might be talking about something that they didn't even want to talk about in the first place, or you just jump right into problem solving and advice giving mode when, again, like they don't even think what they're actually trying to say to you. Gotcha. And they don't feel heard and understood, and then they just get more and more frustrated because of that. So the paraphrasing aspect of things is the biggest portion, the biggest part of communication with parents and their athletes. So just continuing to ask them more questions. And then also, like, you don't need to just ask them, like, how did the game go? You can switch it up. You could be like, what was your favorite moment in the game? Like, what were you like most grateful for today when it comes to your sport? Or like, oh, tell me about a conversation you had with one of your athletes or your teammates, right? Instead of just like, how'd the game go? Because then most of the time I would be like, oh, I went 0 for 4. Oh, I went 4 for 4 and it was great, instead of like diving into those things that actually make you a complete person. Yeah. And it's not just like results based then. So yeah, like that's one of I actually got away from, when I work with athletes, I rarely ever ask them, like, how did your game go? It's more like, all right, tell me the best play from the game. Like, what was your favorite moment of the game? And so that's just a different vantage point to start from, and then you might dive into the results a little later, right? But now you have a little bit more of a mindset. You're looking at the game through like a productive lens instead of through this like negative lens.
Right. Failure lens.
Yeah. Or like with golfers. Do you golf?
Or have I don't. I have, yeah.
Okay. So in golf, there's a lot, especially with mediocre golfers, there's a lot more bad shots than there are really good shots. And whenever you ask a golfer, oh, how'd you play? It's always like, oh, I played like crap. Like, oh, this part of my game just sucked, or I drove every ball like off the fairway to the right. I think I might have hit in the water like 7 times. So I was like, okay, like I don't want to hear about how their bad shots were. Also, I know that like, if you talk about the good shots, they're more likely to happen in the future. So that's what I started asking all my golfer friends and clients. It's like, oh, like tell me about your like best shot today. It's like, oh man, I was like 123 out. I grabbed my pitching wedge. And it was so pure. All I was focused on was like hitting it right at the pin. And I hit it on the green, and then I 2-putted in for a bogey. It was awesome. It's like, okay, well, like normally, bogeys aren't great, but like they still thought it was awesome, because they squared up that one ball. And it's like, that's what keeps you coming back most of the time. And so same thing with softball. it's like, oh, like tell me like the best play today. It's like, oh, well, there was a shot, we lost the game 9-0, but there was one that the girl tagged and our center fielder robbed it from a home run. It was so sick. And I'm like, dude, that's awesome. So yeah, or like when going back to Hamilton, like I was working with Hamilton and we wound up losing the game. But after the game, I talked about how like it's a game of picking each other up, and there were a lot of moments in that game where things didn't necessarily go our way, but then the next play, we picked each other up and it was awesome. Like there was a foul ball down the third base line that our third baseman dropped, and then the pitcher came back and she struck that girl out. And it's like, that's what it's all about, picking each other up. And so
who dropped the ball, Brooklyn?
I'm not going to say she did. I'm not going to say she didn't. But then Lily struck out the hitter anyways. So
didn't matter.
Yeah,
we just put Brooklyn on blast.
Well, she's also the one that's been hitting all the home runs recently. So
she's just been hitting. That's what I've heard.
It's all good. But yeah,
that's great stuff, man. It's I'm having a great time. I mean, an hour always flies by, as you know, and I feel like we could do this for another hour. I don't know what your schedule looks like. Wanted to ask you quickly, well, not quickly, take your time, about the performance side and how the sports life balance comes into effect. And then any final thoughts that you'd like to put out there? Talk about, you professionally, where people can find you, things like that.
Yeah, the sport life balance is an interesting one. But it really comes back to like, what do you want as an athlete, or what do you want as a person? Like, do you want to be an athlete? Do you want to play the game? And like having that honest conversation with yourself. And also like, what's the point of you being there? Is it so that you can become the best softball player possible? Or is it because, you just like the team atmosphere, like you like being a teammate. It's fun for you to show up and hang out with your friends every day, and just being honest about that so that one, your coaches know where you're at, and then they'll coach you differently because of that. And not differently in a bad way, differently in a good way. If they know more about who you are as a person and why you're doing what you're doing, then like you're going to be more likely to like actually have more fun and be more focused and play more free because of that, which all leads to, better performances overall. And then also once you
go ahead, sorry,
once you kind of make that decision about what you want, the things that you need to do then to get what you want become crystal clear.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, when you talk about a player that just wants to be there for fun, or what about the days when a player doesn't want to be there and they, you feel like they don't want to be there? Because I'll be honest, like that affects me, I think, a lot, more often than I'd like to admit. And then I let it affect me as a coach and me as a person. And I try to be as even keeled as I can be always. So can you explain or just give me something to work with on how I can handle those situations?
Yeah. Two things. The first one is that coaches need to be like clairvoyant. They need to be able to see the future. Right. And so if you're a team that's playing a team that, should kick the crap out of you, it's putting that on the table because, they're thinking about it. They're thinking about how they're going to show up and they're going to get their butts handed to them today. And so it's like, hey, listen, like, does this team have, 3 people go in Division I? Have they been scoring 8 runs a game? Yes. Right. That's what we're up against right now. And then it gets back to like your team and your team philosophy and the culture and like what your guys' plan is for that day. And it's like helping them focus on the plan, focusing on what they can control instead of those other limiting, unproductive thoughts that are swirling around for them. So that's the first thing, is like kind of seeing that beforehand. Or it could be on the other end, you should go in and you should win the game, right? And so then they show up and they're like, oh, like we can like take it easy today. And it's like, okay, if that's a thought that you think they're having, it's like going in there and again, just having that same conversation, but the other way around. Talk about those unproductive things that could get in the way and then refocus them back onto the plan and onto the day. The second thing is there's this communication stem that like sentence stem that I like to use a lot. And it's like, when you do X, Y, Z, it makes me think that. So for a coach, this is a really powerful one because now it's taking their behaviors and it's putting a conceptual word to them instead of just coming in and being like, oh, like you don't want to be here today, right? And like kind of labeling that kid, or be like, oh, like you're being lazy, right? Now you're putting behaviors to it that are making you think that. And a person can change their behaviors. So like, hey, like after practice today when I was talking, like I saw you roll your eyes a couple of times, and you weren't really looking at us while we were talking. That makes me think that like you didn't really care about what we had to say, or like you had something else going on. Like, what's going on for you, you know? And now it's not just saying that, hey, like you need to focus, like we need you to look at our eyes when you're doing this, right? And telling them what to do, but it's being curious with them. And now you're building that level of trust and you're building the relationship instead. And then it's going back in and kind of assessing the behaviors that you want to change with them. That's how you get behavior change. If you just tell them to do something different, like that's just behavior interruption. They're probably just going to go back to it again. But if you ask them a good question and you put those behaviors on the table, then you'll probably have that actual behavior change that you want. It could be
Love
like
that.
the same thing, teammate to teammate. Like, hey, like I noticed that you're swinging at fastballs and changeups today, right? Like it makes me think that you're not sticking to the plan of just like hammering the fastball. Like what's going on for you? And they're like, oh yeah, like I totally forgot. Like I'm just up there like swinging right now. And it's like, okay, well, like could we commit to like the fastball or the changeup? And it's like, yeah, okay, like I'll be on the fastball. And now you're more focused on the plan again instead of just going in and being like, man, you suck. Like, why are you swinging
Stick to
at
the plan.
everything? Yeah, stick to the plan. So like you were talking about those athletes that show up and they like, it seems like they don't want to be there, right? It's putting a behavior or two or three that they're doing that's making you think that they don't want to be there. So like just off the top of your head, can you like think of any?
Oh yeah, I mean, I can think of player gets to practice and I can just feel it and tell. But I mean, it's body language.
Okay, so what specifically about their body language?
They look just uninterested. They may even say, it's hot. It's hot. I don't want to be here. I mean, they don't say I don't want to be here, but that that's the next words coming out of their mouth.
Okay, so the behavior then is like, hey, when you talk about how it's hot and the tone in your voice is down, right? That makes me think that like you're kind of already wanting to go home and like not
Already
even wanting to
checked
play
out.
today. Yeah,
Yep.
you're already checked out. Like what's going on for you right now, right? And so it's like you're holding them accountable to their self-talk. You're holding them accountable to their like mindset in that moment. And then they have a choice, like it's either like, okay, I can change what I'm thinking about, or I can continue to focus on these things that aren't going to help me perform in the game today.
Yeah.
But like even you saying like, it seems like you're uninterested, right? Like then an athlete could be like, no, I'm interested. Like, what are you talking about, coach? Or like, oh, man, like coach just came at me today and he's telling me like I'm uninterested or I don't care. And it's like, because they don't know what made you even think that in the first place. And so like getting way more specific with like the behaviors that they're doing, like, hey, like you showed up to the field today, your jersey was untucked, you didn't have your cleats on, like you were late out to stretch. Like that makes me think that you have stuff going on off the field. Like, is everything all good? Now that's a much different conversation than like you show up late, you don't pay attention, you're never prepared, right? And now all of a sudden they feel attacked instead of like feeling a part of the team and that you actually care about them.
Huh. That's good stuff. I'm gonna have to try to implement a little bit of that. We're just dumb guys coaching females, so we don't always get it. I tell them that all the time. I'm like, you guys have to spell it out for me because I don't catch the signs. You have to just say it. Hey, this is how I feel, or this is what I see. And I'm always open to trying to be better for them. So,
yeah. And I don't think that's like a guy thing or a girl thing. I think it's a communication thing. Like that happens everywhere outside of sport as well. Male, female, it doesn't matter. It's just like a communication issue more than anything. Because I mean, like one of my executive clients, like his boss is a female, and he's like in the same exact place where it's like, yeah, it's like she doesn't even listen to me. She doesn't even hear what I'm trying to say. And again, like it's a paraphrasing breakdown. So it's a communication issue. Or it's like if she says like, you're showing up with a bad attitude, like you're not a team player. He's like, I'm a great team player. Like I don't even know what I'm doing that's making her think that I'm showing up with a bad attitude. And again, that's because like she's just labeling him instead of going in and looking at it from a behavior side and being like, okay, these are the 3 behaviors that you're doing that are making me think that, you have a bad attitude. It's just like, I mean, math. If you compare it to math, like if they got the wrong answer, you don't go in and you say like, if you're a math teacher, hopefully you're not saying like, oh, like you're an idiot. You're going in and you're being like, okay, well, like how can we teach you that like 2 + 2 = 4, not 6 or whatever it is.
Right.
You're not going to come at them for being a bad person. You're going to find a new way to teach them how to actually do math. It's the same thing with softball, but the thing is, like, you're not just teaching them about how to be a better softball hitter or fielder or pitcher. You're also teaching them how to be a better person in the grand scheme of things.
That's the biggest part right there. Tyler, it's been great, man. Anything you want to say to the audience? Any last thought?
Yeah, so just in terms of like where people can find me is pazikperformancegroup.com is my website. And then I actually wrote a book on communication skills as well. It's called Ask More, Tell Less for Coaches by Tyler Pazik and Greg Warburton, one of my mentors. So you can find that on Amazon. And then, yeah, I have this the VIP mental game bundle. And if you just go onto my website at pazikperformancegroup.com, it's right there. You can put your email in, press send, and you'll get the mental game bundle right to your email. So yeah, that has my 3 different skills that I always talk about, 3 different pre-game, in-game, and post-game skills. We talked about several of them or a couple of them on this podcast. But yeah, those are, huge when it comes to the mental game and just like achieving peak performance more consistently in softball, baseball, or really any sport.
Gotcha.
So yeah. My number is 847-922-1371. Feel free to text me, reach out, call me. Always open to, working with different athletes and coaches and tems. So
awesome.
Thanks for having me.
And you can do that remotely, right?
Yeah.
You can do that remotely?
over Zoom, also in person. So, I work
awesome.
with all sorts of teams all over the country and, abroad as well, via Zoom and in person.
Awesome. We have to set something up organizationally. I think this is good. I think something that we could really benefit from, not only our players and parents, but also our coaches. So maybe we ought to think about a coach's call or something like that can maybe we can plan in the future. So
yeah, that'd be awesome.
Awesome. All right. Well, I just want to say thanks for listening. We will continue to work and elevate the sport and get caught up with those who are influential in the fast pitch community. Hopefully we can help you navigate your softball journey. If you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Caught Up with Randy Kaye, or at Coach KAZ. That's at Coach KAYEAZ. Or you can listen on Spotify, Caught Up with Randy Kaye. And lastly, you can also follow us on X or Instagram using the handles at Coach KAZ. Thanks again. Have a great day, everybody.